Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for those that are watching the recording as well. Uh, I'm so excited about today's webinar and my guests. Today's webinar is on neuroscience for change and understanding and leading through transformation. And my name is Tim Morton. I'm one of the founders of Prompt AI. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible experts. So first we've got Pauline. I'll give the two of you an opportunity to introduce yourself. But Pauline's a master certified coach and an incredible change specialist that makes it an amazing difference. And also Tibby, who is a neuroscientist and creator of.
So, Tibby, I'll introduce myself
Super.
while we wait for Tim to come back.
Great. You go, and then I will proceed.
Yeah, so I'm Pauline Melnick. I'm a master certified coach. I have my company, which is Melnick Consultancy, and I've been an accredited change manager now, teaching from the learning space around change management, most things change, and leadership. So I've been absolutely enjoying the fact that we can work with clients from both the consulting levels as well as in the learning space. And absolutely a pleasure to work with Tibby in the Neuroscience of Change. And that's the latest offering that we're offering in the change space as we go through. So Tibby, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Pauline. And here I am. TV, sorry, please do call me TV. Yes, I'm a neuroscientist. I was a neuroscientist from the beginning of my career. I actually started my career in investment banking, corporate finance, and then after I worked about 15 years in change. And then during the last 12 years, I'm working with neuroscience. I went back to university and I did a master in clinical neuroscience. I work with my clients doing consultancy, basically implementing neuroscience brain-friendly practices, working within culture designs, working with their leadership development, and really helping organizations facilitating change and applying the Pepe model. And the creator of Pepe model that today we will be talking about, and the author also of a book which is called Neuroscience for Change at Work, the co-author of the book.
Excellent.
Back to you, Tini. Have we got Tim back?
We haven't got Tim back yet, but I'm going to ask Leanne to move the slides just to one slide forward. Thank you. And so today's webinar is going to be around the neuroscience of change, thriving in this fast-paced world. There's so much going on at the moment, Tibby, in the world. And North America is definitely in a fast-paced method at the moment around change. I think we got Tim coming back in now. And so, hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim. You're back with us.
Yes, and how amazing to have two change leaders who amazingly know and how to work through disruption, and that the show must go on. So, Pauline, please do continue.
So, I mean, always this kind of thing happens, you know, like you've got to be prepared as a change agent, right? As anybody. And I mean, today's fast-paced world, Tibby, you know, the things that I'm noticing that leaders need most is they're looking for supports and they're looking for opportunities in what they're currently doing in the change. And so, Tim, I'm wondering what you're noticing as well in the fast-paced world that we're living in.
Yeah, I'm noticing that leaders are really struggling. People managers are struggling on how to support their people. There's a lot of anxiety. Part of this too is we're seeing AI as another component too, we're seeing all of this new data that's being presented, and leaders having to figure out how to work in different ways. We're also seeing that leaders are struggling on how to effectively engage and communicate with their employees and even understand the different needs and accommodations of their workforce and how to really support them, understanding that we all go through change differently. And for a lot of us, our brains work differently and how we process information. So I'm really seeing a lot of leaders struggling with I'm trying to do the best I can with the tools that I have, and I want to do better. And that's been that's been a real focus of what we've been what we've been seeing and experiencing as well.
Yeah. So the number one tool is the brain, and we've got someone that is a neuroscientist on the line here with us. Tibi, tell us a little bit about what you're experiencing and what you've noticed, and why the brain's an important part of this toolbox that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you both were talking, I have noticed that people are actually starting to pay much more attention to change, right? And leaders are starting to actually be involved in change. I think until not long ago, it was only up to project managers. We progressed to change managers, and it was like, okay, this is not me. Where I think now people start to, for the anxiety that you were talking about, people are starting to say, well, how do I manage change? That's one. And the other thing is, and this is where the brains become so relevant. I think it's not relevant anymore to manage change as we used to. It is not about moving from this shock of one change that we need to implement until the integration one, isn't it? Because we have 10, 20, too many changes happening at the same time, and all of them in different phases, that I don't think is relevant anymore managing change as we used to. For me, is where the brain becomes so important, because what it is happening with all these changes is our control system, which is the brain. We are controlled by the brain, by the neuro system, the neuro system, basically get in shock with all this change. Very much from the brain perspective, we are not wired for change, right? If anything, we are wired to resist. However, having said that, there is something very interesting with the brain science, which is brain plasticity, which is the ability that the brain has to adapt. And I think this is what is changing now. I don't think it's about managing change or change resistant. It's about how do we manage a positive adaptation to change. That's how I see it, Pauline.
Yeah. And to me, I find it so fascinating because for years, as you said, it was a program or project manager, and then it was a change manager, and everybody looked to this one person or this little team to manage everything. And we all play a role, of course, but it's just changing. It's just changing some of that, some of that mindset as well. To we all have to play our role, and of course, the leader, their role is just so important in helping helping to give that freedom to make the change come together. So
yeah. It's the number one thing that we can do is to support our leaders very differently, right? And that's where coaching comes in to managing some of this change. Is when we think about neuroplasticity and we're thinking about growth mindset and we're talking about our opportunities that leaders have, they've got to do more with less in many ways. And they also now have to be an experienced person to be able to deal with humans and technology at the same time, right? So it's increased. I think there's a level of increased anxiety for leaders around how to do change now. They want to get it right. They used to, sort of hoping to get things right. And the neuroplasticity piece means that we maybe need to trial and error things. We maybe need to create some psychological safety amongst the team so we get some interested pieces going on. And
Indeed.
so, yeah, so that's, I mean, so I think it's a nice mesh that we have in this.
Perfect.
I agree. Yeah.
So,
And I would say, Pauli, oh, sorry, Tim.
no,
You
please
want
go
to say?
ahead. Please,
I
please.
just wanted to also add that what I have noticed a lot, and it's like people have become more and more cynic about change, especially leaders, right? It is because I already went through change. Probably we didn't see the result, or probably as soon as we complete one change, the world is different already. So with all this agile mindset, I think it have come also cynicism. And I think that is where the brain becomes so relevant, because cynicism is just a maladaptation of the brain.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think that move away from traditional change management to how do we leverage data effectively? How do we think about neuroscience? How do we have different conversations? So with that, could we go to the next slide? I just want to take the group through really our agenda for today as well. And I know we've done introductions, although my introduction may have got cut off, but if it did, again, my name is Tim Morton, and one of the founders of Prompt AI. So so I know we've started the conversation, but we're going to dig into the neuroscience of resistance and adaptation. We're going to talk about harnessing. You call it the PEPE model, or do you call it Pepe model?
Yeah, we call it Pepe model.
Yeah.
That's probably biased to my language in Spanish. Yeah, biased to that. We call it Pepe model. That's right.
Well, I know I'm excited to learn more, and we're gonna see how the model is actually leveraged for change success. We're going to talk a little bit about rewiring leadership, get into creating those neuro-friendly workplace culture, how we would do that, and kind of future proofing. And as we go, for those that have joined us, thank you so much for joining us. We do have the opportunity for Q&A, and so feel free as we go to put your questions into the chat, and we'll look to get through the questions. If there's questions we don't get through today through the discussion, we're going to make sure that there's contact information. We'll also be sending out more information following the session, which includes a blog post with some key themes. You'll also have the opportunity with the recording to be able to share with colleagues or to revisit. So yeah, so I'm quite excited to just jump in, and so why don't we go? Why don't we talk about that first topic? I know we've already started a little bit of the conversation, but resistance is such a big part of transformational change, and when we think about resistance from a neuroscience perspective, Tibby, why do you think that our brains resist change?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tim. And I would say the main reason is because our brain see change with something that we don't know. So it is the unknown, right? If we think about the role of the brain, it is actually helping the perpetuation of the human species. That is kind of why we know we have a brain. And basically, to do that, we need to do two things. We need first to survive, and secondly, we need to pass our genes into the next generation. So as a result, there is what I call the sweet spot between threat and reward. Right? And I think that perpetuation of the species is that nice balance, sweet balance between both of them. Change goes against that principle. Change is basically because we don't know what's coming next. Even if we see the benefit of the change that it will happen, we don't know what will happen, right? And so that in principle, the brain perceives it as a risk of survival and as a risk of passing the genes into the next generation. So that is the reason that we are not wired for change. Now, as I say earlier, the good news is the brain, in most of the time, more than 90% of the time, will adapt to change, even if we first resist, because the brain plasticity that we were talking about. Now, what I tend to talk, and once we start to speak about Pepe model and we go deeper in our conversation, it is not about only facilitating the resistance. It is how do we do that the adaptation being a good adaptation. Because as I say, the brain 90%, if not more, will adapt. But adaptation doesn't mean good adaptation, right? The brain could bad adapt. And bad adapting means becoming cynic. Bad adapting means lack of engagement, withdraw, chronic stress, and so on. So I would reframe it. I say our objective managing change and creating culture for change as leaders is to making change a positive experience so the brain can positively adapt to change.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tibby. It's just absolutely fascinating. And Pauline, from your experience in coaching leaders and various teams, how do you see that resistance shows up within organizations?
Yeah, and it's showing up and just picking up on what Tibby said is, in the cynicism. It shows up as, sort of perhaps, the dramatization within an organization, or what's happening as an inability to prioritize our work. And an inability, so we're asking our leaders to do more with less, and we're asking them to multitask. We're asking them to bring their teams along at the same time. And so there's conflict in that. But there's also a need or a necessity that folks are seeing, that they actually have this drive towards wanting to create this a positive change experience for their teams. And so they're increasing the amount of learning that their teams are doing. They're giving them more tools, which is creating additional kind of balance. We're trying to catch them up, and it's increasing the level of change. Tibby and I, work together closely in that, and Tibby is great at talking about the neuroscience behind it. And for me, it's about everybody, with change, I associate with learning. And do people resist learning? Well, maybe they're going to resist unlearning more than learning. And so the biggest technique that we work with leaders is about what they need to unlearn in order to learn something new in this change space. So
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And so it sounds like we're hardwired to trigger stress when we're going through change. But how do we shift from that resistance to engagement?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Tim. And as you say, yes, we are hardwired to release stress as part of the change. And it actually, our challenge here that stress could be a good thing. I mean, the reason why in front of change, our brain releases stress is because stress releases adrenaline, and adrenaline is energy. Right? So we need energy. I mean, when I learned about what stress was and what stress does to us in terms of providing the energy to actually confront the change or the lion, because we have a very old brain, right? From an evolutionary perspective, stress is doing something good. The issue here is how do we make stress to play in our favor? How do we make adrenaline to play in our favor and not to become chronic, and not to be, because chronic stress, which is what we want to avoid, this is a bad adaptation. This is the bad adaptation that come with a change that is not well managed and that is coming for not having brain-friendly practices. So it is about understanding stress and understanding the cycle of stress, understanding the brain from that perspective, and to translate it into practical tools.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Pauline, anything you wanted to add before we move?
As to be said, the stress is a positive as well as a negative. And the things that relate to stress, sort of as it comes up and in the workplace, again, is going to prevent that burnout that we're seeing in a large portion of our leaders and of our staff that are doing the work. And so we've got to really pay attention to what's kind of going on there from a negative point of stress, but also the stresses in that learning and that gap that we're seeing in the learning that we want to actually fill. That gives us a moment of times of that growth and that adaptation towards where we want to go. So our leaders themselves are in that gap as well as their teams. And so let's close the gap. And we can close that gap. And I think, our next slide gives us an ability to actually do that. I think when Tibby goes in and talks about the Pepe model, and when we teach it, it's really about creating that success. And that's what we all want. We all want a level of success. We want to fulfill our life purpose, our life goal. And how do we help our individuals do that? And from a leadership level, sort of how do we lead others through that process as well? So the confidence to lead ourselves.
Perfect. Well, it sounds like we're ready to learn about the Pepe model, and so with that, Debbie, I know you've developed this model, and it offers a neuroscience-backed approach to navigating change, which to me is a lifelong change person. I'm just so excited. I'd love to hear more, and from a slide perspective, let us know too when it's worth moving the slides, or as well when when we should turn the slides off. So excited to hear from you about the Pepe model.
Great. Yes, Pepe model started actually as part of my dissertation, trying to understand the brain in change. And it went all the way that I started to use it with my own clients in coaching first, and then in leadership development. And then it became actually a model that the certification that we're providing with APMG and Pauline and I are offering now is Neuroscience for Change is based on. And it's basically based on 4 lessons that we learn in neuroscience that help us, what we got here in front of us, help us to hack our brain, kind of turn our brain in our side rather than against us, to positively, to having change as a positive experience. And if you want, Tim, if you want to move the next slide, I can introduce the Pepe model. You can put all of the model if you want. So thank you. So the model, as I say, have 4 domains, which are the 4 big lessons that we learn from neuroscience about why the brain resists change. And that is pain, energy, what we call oscillations of peaks and valleys of our neurobiology and our brain activity, and what we call an error signal, right? What it means is when we are in front of change, the brain perceives it as something painful. As we say earlier, even if we see it as something beneficial, the brain will look act as a threat, and as a result, it will release a signal, which is the error signal that it's saying, hey, my expectations is the world going always stable, so I have more chance to survive, and suddenly the reality is it's changed. So it will release a huge signal, and that signal will create a signal of pain, a signal that I'm feeling uncomfortable. And that's the reason why we don't like to feel pain, and we become aggressive. When we are in front of pain, the neurobiology in our brain of pain is the same: physical pain, social pain, psychological pain. So it will bring us all the neurobiology that will make us a little bit more aggressive, avoiding, not engaged, right? So that's big lessons in terms of the error signal and pain. Now we also learn that change consumes a lot of energy. We know that, right? We call it change fatigue. These days we call it change saturation. That's how it feels, right? Under change, we go and we eat a chocolate. Why is that? And it is because our brain consumes too much energy. It's the organ that consumes the most energy of all of them. It consumes about 20% of the total energy. It only represents about 2% in terms of body mass. So it's always trying to save energy. And that's the discrepancy. And when the brain is trying to save energy, then it will always try to adopt habit. It will always going and do what it used to do. Right? That's why we resist. And the last one of the domain, which is the oscillation of the brain, the peaks and valleys, is we know our brain is, and it's not only the brain, it's the heart, the digestive system, our body in general is really made to work under ups and downs. What I mean is it works really well with oscillation of high level of stress as long as it goes down in the evening. It goes well when we have a lot of excitement, anticipation, and dopamine, as long as we let it go, because otherwise we become addictive to it, and so on. When we are in front of change, this biology remains all the time in the peaks. If I perceive change as something positive, and I am one of the change sponsors who want to sell my idea of change, and I want to bring everyone into it with a very good intention, I'm bringing dopamine high and high and high. People become addictive to it, or other way around. It could be that I have too much stress, that we were talking earlier, that it become chronic, right? So these are the four domains of the brain and why we resist. Pepe Mobile also offer what we call 8 dimensions or solutions. What do we do? The practicality, which is where it comes. So for each of the domains, for example, for pain, we offer 2 solutions. What can we do if we're in front of pain? Well, we can decrease the perception of pain, like, for example, by increasing psychological safety for people to feel value as part of the organization. That makes us change that perception. Or we can do another thing, which is increase pleasure, right? Because our brain does not differentiate. It differentiates, but it's kind of the same circuit between pain and pleasure, right? So if I know that, which is what we learn in Neuroscience for Change in the certification, once we go deeper into this, is trying to say, well, one of the biology, for example, that the brain perceives as increase, or it comes with increase of pleasure, is endorphins, is oxytocin. So what can we do? What practical strategies can I do to increase the level of oxytocin so we have a bit more pleasure and therefore we change pain? Don't know, Pauline, if you want to translate this into practical strategies as we usually do in the course. Exactly.
I mean, it's about the ebb and flow within what we can do as change leaders, right? As in the organization, and how we coach our leaders in this space is to create some ebb and flows in the work that they're doing. Build in some intentional spaces for them to get into this peaks and valleys, right? So we can't always be operating on full tilt. It's not going from one project to the next project and the next project and the next project. That whole adaptation around, good work deserves more good work, right? So we just keep loading it onto those good performers that we have. They need their valleys, they need their sabbaticals. That, you know, sort of that's why a sabbatical in people's lives are important, right, as well. So, but to reduce the pain, and we think about, you know, building on those pieces of the Pepe model, we want to actually reduce the perception of the pain. We got to think about our communications. We really got to think about how we're communicating the change. And if we're just, you know, always on the threat mode of we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, then, you know, the reason of why we're doing this and why we're making the shift is important for folks to understand. And so we're building in that component, not just the ebbs and flows, but we're building in also a roadmap for our leaders that helps reduce not only the error signal of the change, but also builds in the energy towards momentum towards where you want to actually go to the change. So as we do that, we're utilizing the four domains, we're utilizing all 8 dimensions to think about what is actually going on for the leaders and what is actually going on for their teams, and how we can actually shift and move the team through without feeling like we're doing it against the ebb and flow of the organization's flow. Because if the individuals within the organization are moving at a different rate or at a different direction to where the organization is going, then we're actually, you know, sort of creating this negative towards the change as well. And that's creating the additional stress as well. So we can resist change all we want, but at the end of the day, commercially, organizations do have to make shifts and they do have to move towards directions. And that's where you come in, Tim, with artificial intelligence, you know, and understanding sentiment in organizations. So it gives us that piece of information that helps our leaders understand where their teams are and where we want to get them to.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's so much to digest here. And I'm sure that everybody on the call is just absolutely mesmerized and having so many things that are actually going through. For me, you know, a couple things, of course, too, is that, yeah, it's being able to use this and then using the AI sentiment to understand specifically within individual teams what's actually happening and what your people are feeling and what they need to hear and support, and you know, always, you know, also that, you know, starting with the why way before the what and the how. But also, you know, one of the things, you know, Tibi, that you had said that so resonated with me was going back, you know, that desire always to go back to the familiar. And
Right.
you know, as leaders of change, so often it's how do we sustain that, even though the pressure, of course, from, you know, from the brain is let's go back to what's familiar. Otherwise, we, as you said, we end up eating the chocolate. And
That's
so,
right.
absolutely
That's right.
fascinating.
And I think that's where it becomes really handy, the model, right? Because if we kind of break down all this information into really practical strategies, let me give you a really practical example, for example, of energy, right? So within the domain of energy, then same like in pain, we have 2 dimensions. One of them, well, if the brain consumes too much energy and I'm resistant, now I'm going to eat chocolate, as we're saying, because I had too much change. If I manage to save energy within my processes, within how I manage change, I'm already a step forward, right? The idea here is for leaders to become functional, right? We are not going to suddenly love change and everyone is stray away. No, the idea is to become functional so we can reduce slowly that bad adaptation. So if I manage to save energy, or if I manage to release energy under my control, I manage to release a little bit of stress so I get the benefit of adrenaline, or if I manage to create some excitement, because excitement release a little bit of dopamine and helping the brain itself. And a great example, which are part of the 33 strategies that we map within the certification with the 8 dimensions. One of them is work with the small pieces, break down, right? Which is probably a kind of a philosophy within the agile methodology, right? Break down. So if we work and break small pieces, that consumes less energy. If I focus in an iteration of 2 weeks rather than 3 months, I'm kind of saving a little bit of energy. If I focus, I usually say move from big to small because of the nature of our brain and trying for us to get more status and more status. Leaders and organizations usually do the opposite. We tend to work with big teams, big names, big words, big complexity, because somehow these provide us a status, right? The idea here is, how do I move from that culture of big into small pieces, small deadlines, smaller teams, smaller goals, right? Obviously, we need to have the intention and the high vision, but once we have that established, how do we make it smaller? As smaller as we can, one day after another, one that saves a lot of energy. So that's how practical it could become, for example, the energy, right? What about in terms of the error signal, to give you another practical example within the 2 dimensions of the error signal? How can I do to reduce that size of the mismatch between expectations and reality? If I usually, when we communicate change, and here go back to communication, as Pauline was saying, when we communicate change, we tend to make a lot of emphasis in what is new, right? This is the big new change, and we also trying to communicate all the benefit of the change. But even like this, we are focusing on the change. If we're rather focusing on what is changing, on the top of that, we reinforce of what it is not changing, the error signal get reduced. So we should be focusing on both. And this is a practice that I don't see very often within that. We tend to assume, well, what is not changing is kind of, why am I going to say that? And we should be doing both. That calm our error of the brain. So that is kind of the practicality of the Pepe model.
That's brilliant. And we've always looked to share with people the what's not changing. But I don't know that we've really thought about this from a brain perspective. We've really thought about, okay, and maybe we are thinking that way because we're trying to show them that not everything's in flux. There are some real things, but there's a lot of other things that will remain the same and won't. So, I love it. With that, why don't we jump to the next topic? Just thinking about rewiring leadership for the future, and as you've said, neuroscience shows that leadership plays a critical role in shaping how teams respond to change. Pauline, I'd love to hear from you. What coaching strategies do you use to help leaders become more adaptable?
Well, there's always active listening. There's always active listening. Are they actually listening to their teams? Are they actually doing a deeper level of listening, not just solving the problem, and trying to create that fixed mentality, right? Where I've got to go in and they're not resourceful enough and I just got to fix this problem, right? So often I'll get the leaders to stop in their tracks and just ask a question and to draw on the resourcefulness of their colleagues that are coming to them and wanting them to solve something. So that's number one thing. Take the load off a little bit. So there's some mindfulness going on in that practice. You know, when I talk mindfulness, I'm not talking about that we're doing meditations and things like that in the workplace, even though that is helpful. And we can build that intentionally into our meeting structures. What I'm suggesting is to mindfully and intentionally build in these spaces where we are actually listening to what folks want to do in the change and how they're experiencing the change and what it means to let go of or sort of let go of things that they've been attached to in the change. Then we move into, sort of part of that is how we've experienced change in the organization before. And there could be some trauma involved in that. I'm working with a group at the moment that's had some trauma around the past changes. It's not gone well in the past. And, many organizations are experiencing that. And if we think about healthcare for a moment, we think about the experience that they had in trauma around the institutional experience in COVID, our finance industry and the experience of, crashes in the market and or, sort of opportunities of economic downturns and things like that. These are trauma kind of responses to the changes that are going on around them. And so we need to pay attention to that. So my first technique is my leader breathing, right? And are they breathing with their entire lung system so that they're activating the polyvagal nerve, right? So which is connected to how the brain is actually responding. They're not breathing, we're automatically putting our brain into this threat response. Okay. And so it's activating the pain.
Yeah.
And we narrow in on our vision and we don't see the big picture and we become hyper focused on what is actually going on. And so we might be driving without actually seeing the landscape around us in our organizations. So some practical strategies in coaching is really to help them expand that, to actually help them see beyond where they're going, to bring them back to, what's actually real, what can they touch, what then can they feel and sense, and what are they hearing from their people, and so they're really doing some ground truthing. So
yeah, the two of you are I think so incredibly positioned to help companies where, oh, hey, we've always done change this work, it doesn't work, it's not effective, but then why? And then convincing people that it can be different and we can get a different outcome. And even starting with active listening and breathing and, putting them on a different track, but really showing and living that this, there is a different way we can have that successful change outcome. So thank you, Pauline. And Tibby, for you, like, what are some key neuroscience insights that leaders should integrate into their approach to managing change? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yes, and I think is one of my I'm more passionate about, which are the peaks and valleys. I think trying to manage and I say this is trying to work with the neurobiology in our side rather than against us. Right? And it sounds complex, but it's so simple. It's so simple as saying, if I'm managing and in the middle of this chaos of all this change, all my neurobiology peaks, and full of cortisol, excess of hypervigilant, norepinephrine, and so on. How can I do to stop and to reset? And simple techniques, which I think we all somehow do. The issue is that when we are in the middle of the change, we tend to abandon what we call the valleys, the reset. And that's where I would actually start, right? When I work with the senior leaders, when they understand that this is actually happening, that is tangible, when we see in EGGs what happened with the peaks and valleys and how the performance changed when we're in the valleys, then you dedicate the time and you say, yeah, how do I dedicate to go to the times, to the valleys? And it could be something like allowing times for incubations within the team. When we are in change, how much time to allow time rather than taking the decisions today? Say, for example, if we're doing a brainstorming session, rather than coming with a flip chart here and write all the notes straight of the brainstorming session, what if we have the brainstorming session, We don't take notes today, and tomorrow morning, when the brain have opportunity to go to the valleys, go to sleep, reset, go into different brain waves, we come back and now we take the note. All what we're doing is allowing the brain to go to the valleys, and then we become much more creative, we become much more insightful, we have those moments of aha, this genius moment, and we will get much better ideas than if we have the flip chart in front of us. So there are, I call this neuroscience, it is kind of a stepping stone, are the grounds for managing organizations to me. And it is all about this neurobiology. Oxytocin, it's a very interesting one. Oxytocin comes when we feel part of a group, where we feel value, when we feel we belong to. How much, especially in change, how much do we invite end users, everyone within the team, to participate from the beginning? Right? That will help to release oxytocin. It is about making sure people feel they are in the group, right? Rather than outside. That will increase level of oxytocin. And then we're working with the biology more in our side rather than against us, as I usually say. If we want to become creative from the brain perspective, we know we are more creative when we are in the valleys. Not too much, but we are kind of coming from the peaks going into the valleys, right? We know that those are our genius moments. Now, if we are in a day, in a week, where everything is to the top, 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 we have cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, everything high. Well, where with the biology against us? So it is about realizing that actually happened and systematically, rather than leaving it to the luck, what can I do in terms of intervention and to create that culture?
Yeah. Brilliant.
To be
such. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, Tibi, you bring up a really important point that I would love to just tap into there for a moment, which is about that we have all of this information going on for individuals in their groups, and part of the journey is about slowing down enough to actually notice what's kind of going on in the group, right? And at least showing that if we're modeling that behavior, we're giving them an opportunity to actually create the behavior for themselves. It's okay for us to do that. And, sort of it just depends on where you are in the world and what policies that are being created for that. But it gives you an opportunity to step in and to create moments in time for your team that allow this. And whose permission are you waiting for? Right?
Yeah.
If you can't give it to yourself, can you at least give it to your teams? And I think that permission for folks is important, that it's okay to step into change differently this time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that comes to my mind about modeling behavior was years ago. I remember in an office, and they had changed a policy that people could wear jeans. But until a leader actually wore jeans, nobody had permission. There was a policy, but nobody had permission. And it was just another good example that leaders have to walk the walk and really lead by example as we're going through. I'm just looking at the time. I can't believe how fast this time is going. We have 2 more segments. We're going to go through them really fairly quickly, because I want to give time for people to understand, how we continue the conversation, how they get in touch with you. I'm going to want to do one more of these sessions with the 2 of you, because absolutely brilliant. And there's so much that we're just touching the surface on. So I think really quickly, if we can go to segment 4, and that's about creating that neuro-friendly workplace culture, because we've talked about leaders and moving beyond leaders, thinking about creating culture that supports change is just so crucial. Just very quickly, what are some ways that organizations can design change initiatives that prioritize mental health well-being? Either one of you, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think to prioritize the mental health is so important, and some strategies around promoting it is really to allow space for folks to actually have that downtime, right? To create that sabbatical, to create that opportunity for them to progress and to recharge. Taking your meetings offline, and going for a walk at the time that you're doing it, right? You can do both at the same time. Taking your team on opportunities of seeing things differently from a different perspective. Maybe doing your next meeting in a boardroom that's not its regular boardroom is enough to create a change in atmosphere, and will change the dynamic of what your team is actually doing. So sort of these sort of management pieces are important to creating psychological safety, but it's also about creating opportunities for individuals to come together and to do things differently together.
Yeah.
And I will add to, sorry, Tom.
Oh, no, please, Tibi.
I will just very quickly add to Pauline what I really found very valuable is a sweet spot between what we call anticipation, always looking to complete something, and pleasure, pure remaining at the moment. And that you can get that through celebration. How much celebration do we add into our day to day, especially when we are the busiest? It tends to happen that the busiest we are, the more stressed we are, the less celebration, the less pleasure we dedicate time to. And it should be the opposite. And we can only do that by creating habits. If the habit is created of celebrating, even if I'm so busy, if the habit is creating to flavoring something at the present moment, then that it will happen. So that I hope it's also a practical tip to your question, Tim.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love it. We do need to do more celebration, even though, hey, I've got 30 things to do. And then the other thing, from Pauline, I really do believe, as a team, you can walk through any problem, and it's an amazing way to get out of the routine and creatively work through. So absolutely love it. So just from a future proofing change strategies, just thinking about that, and we probably just have about 2 minutes. Just quickly, as we look ahead, what does neuroscience tell us about the future of leadership, of learning, of adaptability?
I would very quickly say we need to focus, as we say earlier, in making change and making the organization and the culture a positive experience. I think the pace that we are living is taking us into bad adaptation, right? Lack of engagement, cynicism, burnout. Unless we make it a positive experience, as we have said, I think we will spirit it down. From neuroscience, that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And for me, it's about the learning. It's about the growth mindset. Yes, you need some fixed mindset in there, and a nice balance, but the growth mindset to actually help the learning, to build the habits, to actually create, sort of some resourcefulness. We want to move people from incompetence to competence. And there's so many of our systems that actually reduce it down to incompetence. And we're using that fear-based mechanism to drive that. Flip it. What can we learn today? How can we be grateful for the little bit that we've got? And where are the opportunities for our team to learn together, to struggle together? It's not all roses at times. And so if we're prepared to have the difficult conversations and tell the honest and transparent truth, it gives us that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I think that having those honest, respectful conversations that are so important and valuable, are it just does so much. So oh my goodness, this has been an incredibly insightful and rich and brilliant conversation, and I'm taking away so many insights, as I'm sure the audience is as well. So a huge thank you to Pauline and Tibi. You both are brilliant. I know how much you shine through in the work that you do. And before we wrap up, Want to go to
We
the
got
next slide?
We got a couple of
Pauline-
slides, yeah.
Yeah.
Is
we've got a couple of
anyone, I
slides.
think, is anyone have got a question? I think I saw a question around.
And
No, I don't see any
can go to
question.
the next slides as we
Yeah.
ask some questions.
Yeah,
So,
Lauren, can you go to the next slide? And Pauline, if you can take us through this, would be brilliant.
Yeah, so we have two courses coming up, and this is not about selling our courses. This is about giving you the tools to be able to do the tasks that you have ahead, to think about your change differently, and to work with each other differently. So if we navigate, kind of through those courses, April 24th and 28th, we're working in Eastern time zone, and in the evenings, we're working with Australian and Pacific time zones, so that you've got there some in the evenings. Tibby won't be joining us in May because it's her night time, but she definitely joins us for the mornings of the 24th and 28th. More dates can be done. You can do this via Teams as well. I'll get you to move forward. You can contact us. We're offering 20% discount. If you register, you just let us know that Tim sent you. Or that you saw us here in the webinar, and just go ahead and either send me an email, or you can go up and you can register using our link. And I placed it in the chat there earlier. So let me see if I can do that again so that you've got that
And
link.
what I could say, one of the beauties of this program is that we translate all what we've been talking about here into really practical strategies. Like, we take you through break rooms, we put it into practice, we convert this into really practical 33 strategies that we can either start using it as a very strategic or as a tips as well. So it's we bring it really down to the earth.
Wonderful. And again, thank you both so much. What we're going to be doing as well is we'll be sending the recording out. We'll be sending information on how to get in contact with both Pauline and Tibby, how to take advantage of their offer. We're also going to post this so that we have an opportunity to start to engage as a group and ask those questions and really move forward. I do want to highlight too, we've got another session coming up on April 3rd, and Colleen Quinn will be leading that. It's about building culture within the workplace. Please do consider signing up. And again, so grateful to Pauline and Tibby. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tim, and absolute pleasure, and happy to come back.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Pauline. It has been a pleasure to be here with you all.
I can't wait for part 2. Thanks, everybody. Have a brilliant day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.